Hello and welcome to the reading for my book, You Must Be a Jones. My name is Lydia Jones Cole, and I'm so happy to welcome you here to my inaugural book reading and signing. I wrote my book because I was inspired to share stories about positive black families. There weren't enough stories that I had read or I had seen about the wonderful lives that black families lived across this country. And while my family was a large family and we grew up in a small neighborhood, we had a wonderful life. And when I would hear people say negative things about black families, I would say, that's not the life that I remember, and that's not the life that my neighbors and my friends live. So I was inspired to share our family story in my book, You Must Be a Jones. I'm going to read a couple of selections, and then we'll take questions, and I hope you enjoy. I'm going to start with the chapter 4, Nana's House. With primarily Mom and Nana in the house, there were now fewer mouths to feed. But money was still in short supply. The country continued to suffer through the Great Depression, which would last until 1939. Like everything else, the Depression hit African Americans worse than most. Although Mom was the youngest and still in high school, she quit school to work full-time to help Nana pay the bills. It wasn't long after I left school that I met your father. I knew him all along. He was a cadet. I used to see him coming home in his uniform, looking all sharp. Mom and Dad knew each other already. Everybody in Halls Hill knew everyone else, or they knew each other's family. One night at a neighborhood party, Mom and Dad got to know each other better. We were at a lawn party one night, and we got to talking, and that's how it started. We started dating, and then we got married. I was 19, and he was 22. As Mom reminisced about this time, a huge smile came across her face. Lawn parties were a big deal for young people growing up in Halls Hill. Every weekend, somebody had a lawn party. That was a big thing. It was more or less like a get-together, Mom said as she recalled her teenage years. Our parents didn't have a wedding. They drove to Rockville, Maryland on November 17, 1941, only informing Mom's sister, Aunt Helen, who went with them to witness their nuptials, possibly because they had discovered Mom was pregnant. Excited to share the news about their recent union, the newlyweds drove home. Entering the house, they were most likely a little nervous, but in a good way. Mom proudly announced their marriage to Nana and showed her the marriage license. A cold shoulder and a frown let them know Nana was not pleased. Several days passed before she looked at the marriage license. Mom's sister, Beanie, didn't help matters. She turned her nose up and expressed her displeasure. I think that's awful, Aunt Beanie said. But our Aunt Helen was different. Mom adored her oldest sister, and it was easy to understand why. She congratulated the newlyweds and brought them a small wedding cake to celebrate their new beginnings as husband and wife. Years later, Mom recalled this story to us. She seemed to understand Nana's reaction in hindsight. You know, they always want you to marry the best, Mom said. Her family would come to learn he was the best. The next passage I'm going to share is from chapter 5. It's called A Home of Our Own. Dad was the last to leave for the war and the last to return home in April 1946. As soon as he arrived home, he wanted to purchase a house for his family. He returned to his job at the Washington Navy Yard, working to make that possible. 2.5 years was a long time to be separated from his young son and wife. As a 4-year-old, George Mason's recollections of Dad were through the letters Mom read him and the pictures tucked in each envelope. Years later, he thought back on what it felt like to have Dad back home. Dad went to work, and I just remember being excited, running back and forth between our driveway to Miss Edgy's and Mr. Sam's house and grabbing pears and fruit off their trees. I was just running around being a kid. In Nana's house, George Mason was the center of attention, not simply because he was Mom and Dad's only child. Between Nana, Uncle Clarence, and Uncle Dee Dee, there was always someone around with a big hug, ready to play ball, or to surprise him with candy or a toy. He was attentive to what the adults did, especially Nana. Nana was always working around the house, washing clothes on the scrub board and hanging them outside to dry on the clothesline. For a while, they had chickens and a garden. On Saturday, they prepared for Sunday dinner by grabbing one of those chickens and chopping the head off. Then they would douse that chicken in a tub of hot water and take it to Nana to prepare for our Sunday dinner. George Mason had less than a year to grab all the attention he could get. By January 19, 1947, he had a baby brother named Michael. That's Michael. Everyone was excited about the new baby, except George Mason. George Mason said everything was great until Mike came. George Mason wasn't out playing with his friends. He pouted around the house and yearned for the attention he once had to himself. After several months passed, he sat on the steps of Nana's front porch with Mike in his carriage. He looked sullen and mumbled to himself, "Why is everybody always playing with Mike? What about me? Why are Mama and Daddy always holding him?" A split second later, George pushed Mike's carriage down the dirt road. It hit a bump. Up in the air he went. Ouch. Mike hit the ground and the crying began. The sound of a baby's cry sent Mom running to see what was going on. George Mason ducked under the porch, where he thought he'd be hidden for at least a while. Mama found him. "Come on out, boy. You could have hurt your brother. Why'd you do that?" He stayed under the porch and refused to come out. He probably thought, maybe, just maybe they will forget about me, and the spanking he knew awaited him. Once Dad got home from work and heard the story, he tried coaxing George Mason out. He still wouldn't budge. Dad told Mom, "Let him stay. When it gets dark, he'll be happy to come out from under that porch." As Dad predicted, George Mason's fear of a spanking was no match for the darkness. As the sun set, with few, if any, street lights near the house, his fear of the dark got the best of him. Finally, he crawled from under the porch and went into the house. "Couldn't take the dark any longer, huh?" Dad remarked as he reached for the switch laying on the table in front of him. Before the switch touched George Mason's legs, the tears began rolling down his eyes. "Boy, I bet you'll think twice before you do anything like that again," Dad said. The spanking he tried to avoid was waiting for him, and no less stinging than if he had received it hours before. As he lay on the bed trying to recover from the painful episode, he had no idea how much things would continue to change. George Mason began attending nursery school, where he was not the center of attention, and learned how to share. Each weekday, he anxiously awaited to be picked up by someone from Mother Goose Nursery School. "Mama, the people from Mother Goose are here," he would call out as he stood at the door, watching for the car to pull up in front of the house. Thelma Nickerson, the school's owner and the operator, was a neighbor of ours. In the early days, the school classes were held at someone's home. She would later move the school to the basement of Second Baptist, an African American church, about 20 minutes from our neighborhood. In nursery school, everyone learned the alphabet, numbers, colors, and social skills. When you left Mother Goose, you were ready for first grade. The next section is, next passage I'll read is from Langston Elementary School. It's chapter 7. Langston Elementary School had a multidimensional role in our community. In many ways, the school and the all-black fire station across the street from Langston, Fire Station number 8, were the hubs of our community, fulfilling multiple purposes beyond their designated function. The year before Roz began attending school, Langston expanded beyond the original red brick 4-classroom building. They had a cafeteria that doubled as a multi-purpose room and a first and second grade classrooms near the new school office on the first floor. The expansion of Langston meant Fire Station 8 was no longer the only place civic groups and organizations could meet. The John M. Langston Citizens Association, a powerful community organization, moved their meetings to Langston's multi-purpose room. And the groups later organized, like the Boy Scouts and Brownie Troops, met at the firehouse. For a few hours during the day, the multi-purpose room became a lunchroom. Mr. Mervyn, the school janitor, who was a close family friend, would unfold the long tables and benches that had been recessed into the wall and locked in place. They were reminiscent of a Murphy bed. At the end of the lunch period, he cleaned them off and placed them back into the wall. After school, the room became a rehearsal and practice area for cultural and fine arts activities offered through the recreation department. In those days, segregation touched every aspect of life, even Arlington's recreation department. An African-American man named Mr. Johnson managed the recreation department for Arlington's black communities. There were a variety of activities to choose from. Students paid a fee for all kinds of lessons: piano, tap dance, ballet, majorette, saxophone, and clarinet. Most of the kids in our family took lessons after school. I took tap dance, and Roz took majorettes. Walking past the multipurpose room after school, you would hear light and joyful sounds. Click, 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 click. You heard the tapping of metal from the shiny patent shoes as they connected with the linoleum floors. On an alternate day, you would hear the cadence of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, as the ballet teacher called out the moves. Just beyond the multipurpose room in the library, students took piano, clarinet, and saxophone lessons. You didn't only hear the sounds and expressions of happiness coming from the multipurpose room in the library, you could feel them. The biggest beneficiaries of Langston's expanded facility were the teachers and students. The addition of the kitchen and multipurpose room meant students could eat lunch at school, whether your lunch was from the cafeteria where mom worked or a brown bag. Students now had a designated space to eat. I'm going to read one more selection, and then you can answer questions or have a discussion if you'd like. This is from Summertime. As kids, many of our most unforgettable moments happened in the 3 months between the last day of school and Labor Day. Summer brought with it an air of freedom. The day school ended, everything suddenly slowed down, and it felt like we didn't have a care in the world. In 1958, Linwood and I had just finished first grade, and we could go on to the playground on our own, or at least with Roz. We explored the neighborhood, especially the wooded areas and creeks nearby. It wasn't as rural as when our parents grew up, but there were still wooded areas that beckoned to us to come in and explore. But our adventures almost always started on the playground. Somehow, everything worth remembering seemed squeezed into June, July, and August. We played and worshiped, our friendships grew, even teenagers who had part-time jobs and didn't have the luxury of total freedom found time to hang out with friends at the beach and enjoy a lawn party, just as our parents had done. It was all at once an ordinary and memorable, carefree and magical time. I was always an early morning riser, especially in the summertime. If the sun was up, I was too, even at 6 or 7 years old. In the steamy, hot summer days, we cooled our upstairs bedroom with screens placed in the windows. Nearly every morning, I heard a woodpecker hammering on the tree. There was a chorus of nature sounds, with the next door neighbor's rooster chiming in for a while. I'd sit up, look out the window, hoping to see the woodpecker. It seemed so close, but I never laid my eyes on that bird. When I look back at Roz and Audrey, they were still sleeping. Getting out of bed, I was careful not to wake them. Then I walked down the hall, past Mike and Linwood's bedroom, and downstairs to the bathroom. In our house, getting up at dawn wasn't about the early bird catching the worm. It was about getting into the bathroom and out before my brothers and sisters woke up. With only one toilet in our house, our timing was everything. Some days, I wouldn't be so lucky. When I hit the bottom step and saw the bathroom door close, I'd sigh, darn. Sitting on the steps where I could see the door, I waited until it started to open. Not a chance anyone wouldn't know I was next. But more often than not, when I came down the stairs, I could hear Mom in the kitchen, water running, cabinet doors closing. I peeked into the kitchen and greeted her as if I'd been up for hours. Good morning, Mama. Good morning, Lydia. Did you have a good night's sleep? Yes, ma'am. And into the bathroom I'd go. It'd only take a minute for someone to slip by and get ahead of me. Occasionally I awoke even earlier. Mom might be still sitting in her chair in the living room reading the Bible. She always began her day with prayer and a private moment of worship. On the weekdays, we headed straight to the playground. Once Mom gave the okay, we were gone. Saturdays were different. Dad and Mom had a routine that started with creating the week's grocery list. George, we're out of milk. We probably need a gallon to hold us over until the milkman comes next week. You know Mike can drink a gallon by himself, Mom would say. Anything else, said Dad? Pick up roast beef for dinner tomorrow, chicken, liver, and fish sticks for later in the week. It would go on and on until Dad had created the shopping list of all the items Mom wanted him to buy. Then Dad would let us know he was leaving. Hey, Rosie, Linwood, and Lydia, come on, we're going to the Safeway. When Audrey was older, she'd come along too. We'd yell out, here we come, Daddy. Through the kitchen and out the back door we'd run, jumping into Dad's black Plymouth. Before going to the Safeway, we stopped at Nana's to pick up Uncle Dee. He would shop for himself and Nana at the same time. Dad was buying groceries for our family. From Nana's, it was a short trip up Lee Highway to the grocery store. Most businesses of note were on Lee Highway. It's where Langston Elementary and Fire Station 8 were too. Closer to our neighborhood were several black-owned businesses, 2 barbershops, the dentist's office, and me and Linwood's godmother, Adele's Beauty Salon. Further down were Safeway and People's Drug Store. On the way to the grocery store, I thought about the allowance Dad would give us and what I wanted to buy. Dad parked in the Safeway lot and gave us each 25-cent allowance to spend on whatever we wanted. Across the street to the 5 and 10-cent store we ran, and Dad went grocery shopping. We entered the store almost bouncing in anticipation of what toy we might choose. Up and down the aisles we walked until some toy or item caught our eye. Before long, we would feel the glare of a middle-aged white lady with black hair staring us down. My natural inclination was to say hi, but her glare was cold and grimacing. Instead, my shoulders tensed, my head slightly dropped, and in one moment shrinking as if to hide, and the next feeling afraid. Her scowl and mean spirit made us feel unwelcome. She didn't need to speak with disdain. She wanted us to feel like we didn't belong. As we got older, we became more determined and stopped recoiling. We let go of our fear. With our heads held high, we continued to shop there whenever we wanted. The woman in the 5 and 10-cent store never watched or followed the white kids that came in, and we noticed. Every time we went in, she followed us. Those weekly visits to the 5 and 10-cent store were our first one-on-one encounters with racism. I have one more chapter I want to read, one more passage I want to read. Sorry, it's short. It's from the chapter called Church Life. Every summer, at least one of us went to the Baptist Center. Roz was the first to go, then Linwood and I, followed by Audrey and later Wilma. Most of us like camp, while others, like me and Mike, who had visited an earlier sleepaway camp, didn't find it to our liking. The Baptist Center was in a remote location, miles away from commercial businesses and residential communities, and hours away from our home. Kids came from all over Northern Virginia to spend a week or two. My first and only experience at camp was not one I wanted to relive. Linwood and I were there together, but he had friends like Jimmy to hang out with. I don't recall knowing any of the girls. Mom and Dad had paid for Linwood and me to attend camp for 2 weeks. Fortunately for me, I had to go home for a piano recital at the end of the week. I begged Mom and Dad not to make me go back. Roz and Linwood both enjoyed camp and went on to be counselors, as did Audrey and Wilma. More than any of us, Audrey and Wilma were diehards. As kids, they were at the Baptist Center every chance they got. Audrey had a chance to convince Mom to let her go away to camp. Because of my negative experience, Mom wasn't sure Audrey would like it there. But Audrey refused to take no for an answer. She worried Mom about going until she finally gave in. Once Audrey went to the Baptist Center, it became a summer destination she anxiously looked forward to from the time she was 9 until the age of 15. She started as a camper and then became a counselor. For Audrey, the camp gave her a sense of freedom and independence that she had not enjoyed anywhere else. Hanging out with her friends, Charmaine and Gail, sleeping and cooking outside was Audrey's idea of fun. There was no one to tell the campers what clothes to wear or how to comb their hair. Outside of following the camp's rules, all the decisions were up to each camper. She made new friends and had a chance to learn leadership skills, watching and listening to the teens who were counselors, like she would one day become. Wilma benefited from many of the same experiences as Audrey. She first visited the camp when Mom and Dad took Audrey for one of her 2-week stays there. When I was about 5 years old, I rode with Mom and Dad to drop Audrey off at camp, and I hid under the bed in the older girls' barracks. In my mind, I thought they would leave me, and I would get to stay at camp. Of course they found me, and I went home with them, Wilma said. Like Audrey, Wilma had friends that went to camp at the Baptist Center. Wilma's best friend, Cheryl, was a grandchild of Reverend Brown, and he was the camp director. Even before Wilma became a camper, she spent time at the Baptist Center. Reverend Brown often took Cheryl with him to the camp, and Wilma went along to keep her company. You had to be 8 years old to attend camp, and both Wilma and Cheryl were there every year that they were eligible. Wilma learned to swim at camp and later became a lifeguard there. The Baptist Center gave Wilma a chance to gain leadership skills and develop confidence, but she remembers it being in a much more structured way than Audrey had experienced. When I was 13, Reverend Brown got me on the Northern Virginia Baptist Association board as a youth representative. I'm not sure how he did it, but it gave me a chance to have a big speaking role there. All of the association's events were at the Baptist Center, so I spent time there beyond summer camp. The Baptist Center wasn't a fancy camp. It wasn't the trappings or decor that drew kids back year after year. It was what they learned about life, themselves, and others. It was a space where black youth like Wilma and Audrey learned how to be resilient, confident youth and gain skills they would build upon for the rest of their lives. For 2 weeks every summer, they escaped the cocoon of their parents' watchful eyes to make mistakes, learn from them, and grow up a little more each year. So, does anyone have any questions or, and I want to introduce some of the people that star in my book. My family that's here. My sister Rosalind's over there sitting. My brother Michael over here in the corner. My sister Wilma is sitting here on the sofa. And my sister Audrey is back there in the corner. Well, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the passages. And if you haven't read the book, I hope.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. What's your question?
So I'm Lydia's husband. So.
Oh, okay.
I'm in the book with Early. But I just wanted you to extrapolate a little bit about how your book is exemplary of the resolute nature of black families coming through the civil rights era, and why it's so important for people to read your book.
Well, I think one of the things that I talk about in my book that really kind of sets a tone or gives a perspective about what it was like to grow up in our community in Halls Hill and hundreds of other communities like ours across this country. I mentioned the John M. Langston Citizens Association and about what a powerful organization it was in our community, and it was that. But what made it powerful were the people who ran the organization and were members of the organization. And they were our parents' parents, and they were just resolute people who weren't willing to give up. While there were many things that my sister Wilma talks about, and tells the history of Halls Hill and how it started in her book. And it's a book I would recommend that everyone, if you haven't read, that you read, because it really, really does explain and give a perspective on what it means and shows the strength of black people in this country and what we did and what we refused to give into to move forward. And for us, many of us in this room that grew up in Halls Hill, and certainly my family, what the people that came before us did and refused to give into so that we could go to college and that we could have a better life. So that you'll see that through my family in the book and through other families. But it was our parents who, when I look back and remember back, I was a kid on them going to meetings and at John M. Langston, the Citizens Association meetings, and seemed like they were always at those meetings. But they were quiet warriors. They didn't make a lot of noise, but they were persistent, never gave up, and they were determined to make sure that the taxes that we paid, just like everyone in the white community, we didn't get a break because we were black, but that we also eventually were going to get what we deserve. We deserve sidewalks, we deserve better schools, we deserve good books. We didn't pay any less, but we got less. My parents got less. Our parents' parents got less. But they were, as I said, they were resolute, they would not give up, and they continued to, in a very quiet and determined way, to fight for what they deserved and what they knew their children deserved. And because of them, we got better schools, we got sidewalks, we got better plumbing, we got plumbing. Some of us didn't have plumbing, our grandparents didn't growing up. And so that was, to me, it wasn't, I wrote this and I tried to explain or talk about our lives, the good and the bad. And when I say the bad, I don't mean the bad that out from our community, but the bad in terms of some of the things we had to endure and that they had to endure, so that it wouldn't be hidden, that what you see on the Maury Povich show wasn't a representation of who we are and who we were, because those are just no different than other people. This is one of the things I always say, is that black people have struggles just like white people have struggles. Unfortunately, our struggles are painted as if it's our entire community, our entire race, and that's so untrue. And so that's why I tried to talk about our story, the struggles and the good times and the love. There was a tremendous amount of love in our community, among our neighbors, and that was the same here in the southern part of Arlington and those communities as well. And hopefully through my book and my sister's book, that other people will also tell their stories. Because if we don't tell our stories, the Maury Povages of the world will be what people think of the Black community.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, if there are no more questions, I hope you enjoyed, and there's lots of other really good stories, and just a history of where, throughout my family, some of the other important things that have happened in our community and in our neighborhood.
We actually have a question from Facebook.
Okay.
Was there anything particularly special that you'd like to share that you learned when writing this book? And this is from Iman Cole.
That's our daughter.
I don't know that there was anything special, except how difficult it is to write a book. Now, I didn't think it would be easy, but and it was difficult for a lot of reasons. I've done some type of writing all of my life in my career. But what I learned when writing a book is just how much different it is than what I experienced writing when I was in television, and then when I worked in corporate communications. Writing a book is a different kind, and it's I think one of the best things is that I just loved learning a new kind of writing. It expanded my writing skills, and I learned that when people write books, that it's how important it is to make someone else feel what you feel. And so learning how to do that, and hopefully people feel what I felt and what my family, my brothers and sisters felt as we went through growing up, and experiences what my parents felt. In the early part of the book in particular, I talked about the Depression and World War II, and those were really important times that really kind of took me back and helped me probably understand my parents even better, because as I wrote it, I had to feel it. And so I think I maybe felt some of what they felt.
How long did it take you to write this book?
Well, it was on an accelerated schedule. So I wrote the book through a program called the Creator Institute. So there were specific benchmarks that you had to meet. And so I started the book in February, late February, and I finished writing it in November. So in less than a year.
February 2020?
Yes.
Yeah, and I can attest to the fact that they had a whip on her. Every week it would be.
I mean, I think, I didn't have to meet the deadlines, but I wanted to meet, I'm kind of a deadline-oriented person anyway, and so I didn't want to be in a position where, so if I didn't meet the deadlines, I could have then finished the book in the next session. But I wanted to finish with everybody else, or what I thought who knows what everybody else was doing. I didn't know, I just assumed everybody was meeting their deadline, so I wanted to meet my deadline too. And so I worked, when I wasn't working on my part-time job, I was literally writing every day, 7 days a week, from the end of February through November.
I'd just like to say, Lydia, I'm Brenda Cox, and I grew up in South Arlington in the Valley. And still being here, I just want to say thank you for what you have done, and for Wilma, for telling the story. Living in Arlington now, with the changes that are going, people think time started when they got here, and they stand on strong shoulders. And I just appreciate your making the effort to tell the story. It's priceless, and I tell people you had to be here to really know what it was like. And I so appreciate it. I haven't read it, but I know I'm going to love it.
Oh, thank you.
It's a
Thank
good
you so
read.
much.
It's a good read.
Well, to Facebook Live, thank you so much for joining in. And if you got in on the end and you want to hear more, you can come back at 6:30, and I'll be doing another reading and Q&A session at that time.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.